C-suite, so you just say thank you so much and hand the mic over to Mike Stewart from the Ballard Alliance. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Brian, and thank you so much for hosting. My name is Mike Stewart. My day job is I'm Executive Director of the Ballard Alliance, which is a neighborhood improvement district, and I know we've got people from all different neighborhoods across the city. We've got our Soto friends here, University District, and other places as well. So great to see such a good turnout here. I'm also a Seattle resident. I am also a huge fan and supporter of Senator Patty Murray as well, and that's why I'm here tonight. And the issues that we grapple with in our neighborhoods, there are many, right? We're all struggling. We've just made it through this pandemic, hopefully. I've talked to countless business owners. We had the opportunity to do a tour together and talk to business owners who have received tremendous amounts of support through SBA, which had a very critical impact. And we see the other issues too that play out on our streets every day. Many of them issues that really are the responsibility of municipal government in many respects. However, we know that federal policy and great leadership like this is also absolutely important and paramount. So thank you all for putting your questions together. We've got them assembled. We're going to try and get to as many of those today. So that'll be the second part of this evening. But right now, I would like to introduce Senator Patty Murray to.
Thank you so much. Where did Brian go? Brian, he went back to work. He's back there. Oh, there you are. Brian, thank you for letting us use your space here tonight. It's absolutely gorgeous. I really appreciate it. And Mike, thank you for working with me to make sure we run smoothly here today. And it is great to be in Lake City. I love this little community. I want you to know that I grew up in Bothell, and my memory was getting on that bus from Bothell, coming down to Lake City, transferring over to Northgate. Big time for somebody who was 13. So this is great to be here. But it's wonderful to be able to talk to people who own small businesses and to hear about your challenges and to talk about how we can be a good partner at the federal level. You know, I grew up in a family where my dad ran a small business in Bothell, Meredith 10-cent store. Don't know if anybody remember that, but a little store on Main Street of Bothell. So that is what I grew up knowing, the Main Street of Bothell and Meredith 10-cent store. It's where I worked. I did everything from, you know, putting stuff on the shelves to running the cash register to sweeping to doing, you know, just any job my dad told me to do. We had 7 kids. He put us all to work. But I loved and hated it. But I learned something really important, and that is those little small businesses are the hub of our community. It was the business owners in downtown Bothell who made sure that the community was taken care of. They organized the 4th of July parade, they ran the Lions Club. If somebody was hurting in our community, they heard about it first and made sure that people were taken care of. And I learned that ethic about small businesses and have kept it in my heart ever since, because I know small businesses really are the heart and central part of every community in this nation. So when I go to work as a senator, I'm always thinking, how will this impact those small businesses, those families, those community members that are so important, that keep our communities vibrant. So I will tell you, when the pandemic hit, one of the first things I thought of as I saw people closing their businesses, customers staying home, all of the challenges we don't want to think about, but we remember them well. And I thought, wow, we have got to make sure that these small businesses don't close. Not just because we don't want to lose those businesses, but we don't want to lose the heart of these communities. How do we ever get that back? So we went to work right away in the COVID packages to make sure we provided those PPP loans and other things that we had in there to as many people as possible, so that we could keep those doors open and keep people employed and not let you lose out. I wish every single person had got one. I know we didn't, but I will tell you that I've talked to so many people who, almost with tears, tell me if I hadn't have gotten that, I wouldn't be here today. And now we have our businesses here, and they're doing really well. So I'm just excited that we did that originally. But I also knew that was not all we needed to do, because like everybody, you were facing real challenges, supply chain challenges, employee challenges, that people were not coming to work, inflation, higher costs, all of the things that have just impacted our economy across the board. So we immediately went to work to begin to address those. The bill that we passed, the bipartisan infrastructure law, to get our transportation system working again, the biggest investment in roads and bridges and highways in our ports, making sure our supply chain was working again, making sure we were doing a better job of broadband, that our goal is that everybody will have equal access to broadband, and I know many of you now rely on internet services, and your customers do too, so we got to make sure everybody has access to that. That was a huge investment, a major step forward. But we also knew the supply chain issues that are caused by the pandemic have had a huge impact on your ability, everyone's ability, to get what they need. One of the biggest challenges was all those products that we rely on, from our cars to our cell phones to toys to, it's about everything we own is the chips that are in them. And we lost our supply chain because we couldn't get it from China. They shut down production. So here in our country, we were facing increased costs and shortages of absolutely everything that had a chip in it. I know this personally because my washing machine went out. And it took us 5.5 months to get a basic washing machine during that time. And I had to go to, well, it's a small business, so it's okay, a laundromat. For 5.5 months. I'd go to DC on Monday, fly back on Friday, go to the laundromat. It hasn't changed since I was in college, still takes quarters, and I will tell you, I'm very glad we finally got our washing machine. But it was real. It was real. And we passed the CHIPS and Science bill this last summer to make sure that we are now going to make and manufacture those chips right here in America. So we never go through that again. I'm very excited about that. Had the opportunity to talk to a number of businesses that are now investing in that. We need a workforce to make sure they are capable of doing that. But it, in the end, will help us make sure that we can lower prices and never have to rely on that importation of our chips again. So that was a critical bill that we passed. And of course, we have to make sure we keep lowering costs for families so they have those extra dollars to be able to spend on many of the things that you rely on them spending on, whether it's here at the brewery or whether it's in some of our small businesses that I talk to here. Your customers aren't going to be there if they don't have cash. So lowering costs for everybody was what we were really focused on. And we did it in two critical ways. One was climate change, so we could lower energy costs. We made the biggest investment ever in climate change and a move to a clean energy economy. That is good for our climate, it's good for everyone, but it creates jobs here, and our goal is that we in the United States of America create those new clean energy jobs and technology and sell it to the rest of the world. So this is really important for our economy. And the second part was lowering costs of prescription drugs. I know many of you struggle to provide health care for your employees, and you lose your employees if they can go to another job that provides it. So making sure we lower those costs was one thing really important we did in that. We did it in a way that makes sure that Medicare, for the first time ever, will be able to negotiate using their bulk purchase with pharmaceuticals to help lower the cost of prescription drugs for seniors. That will lower the cost for everyone. So, and also extended the ACA tax credit. So a lot of people right now would have been paying a lot more for their insurance, including many of you. But we passed the ACA extension to make sure we had provided subsidies so people could afford the health insurance they need. And that's going to make a huge difference going into the new year. So we have a lot more work to do, but I wanted to come here tonight and hear from all of you about the challenges you face and answer your questions, and want you to know that this really helps me do a better job for all of you, and I appreciate your being here tonight. So thank you so much for coming.
Okay. You know what I love is I love that your opening remarks, you basically hit on almost all of the thoughts and questions that have come in, which is great leadership in my opinion. But we'll go through these. We had quite a few questions and we're going to try to get to as many as we can, but it'll give you an opportunity to do a deeper dive. So first question, thank you for all of your efforts to get funding to small businesses, especially to address Restaurant Relief Fund. Do you think there's any more support out there to level the playing field? So much went to so few.
Yeah, we tried to extend the restaurant fund, and as you know, we were short of votes. The Republicans wouldn't help us get the votes we needed to get it passed. That was one of the biggest disappointments I had, because probably many of you know what I know, that some people got it and some people didn't. Some people got it that were across the street from someone who didn't. And the program was shut down. We had to get it restarted. And as a result, a lot of people who applied almost at the same time, there was a real challenge for folks, and that just, it wasn't fair, and I'm so frustrated that we were not able to get additional funds. But I am watching this very closely. I know a number of our restaurants are still struggling with this. I've not given up, because I think that it is extremely important that we make sure there's equity in this, because it's just important for our thriving communities. But also, I know you're all still struggling. You're seeing the costs of inflation. Your employees, harder and harder to get people to stay in small businesses, especially if they get offered some big package somewhere else right now. Transportation costs continue to go up. So to me, it was a program that was really great. We just need to make sure that we work hard to try and extend it again. And I'm hoping that after the election, we can get enough votes to do that.
Terrific, thank you. The next two questions are similar, but I wanted to read them both because I thought they both were important. And the first question is, starts with a statement: I believe mental illness and drug addiction plays a huge part in homelessness. In my neighborhood, does anyone in Congress agree? Are there any solutions? So that's sort of the first part of the question. And then the second is, having worked for over 15 years in the DeSoto district, our company has been increasingly impacted by the homelessness and opioid crisis. The expansion of the Salvation Army site is a great start, but what is our country going to do to help support groups in our communities addressing these issues? So a little bit of a combination of those issues.
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem in absolutely every community in our state, in every corner, in small rural cities and big cities and neighborhoods, everywhere. And clearly, as a country, we have to step up and address this from many, many different angles. There is not one simple silver bullet to this. First of all, the cost of housing has really impacted the number of people on the street. You asked particularly about drugs and drug use. Yes, but a lot of it is the cost of housing. And we worked during the ARP process to make sure there was additional funds for rental assistance and vouchers for folks, made sure that they were able to stay in their home. But if you don't have a home, you can't go to work. So we have to make sure we're doing the next steps. At the federal level, we have to focus on what our cities are doing, what our communities are doing, what's our state doing. But at the federal level, one of the things we are really looking at is the supply issue. If there is not enough of supply, the prices go up and people can't afford it, and you see them on the streets. So we're looking at, actually, in the budget that we're working on right now, hoping to pass as soon as we get back, a grant supply for communities to build housing, so that they have the capital to be able to do that. That is one step. You mentioned drugs, and that is another. Why are people on the streets? Some of them are addicted to drugs. It's a healthcare crisis in this country. Actually, under the Trump administration, I worked on a bipartisan way to really up our investments, and this was pre-COVID, our investments for community-level help for people with addiction issues. And of course, during the pandemic, they, like everybody else, it became a real challenge. Well, so what right now I am doing is I'm working with Senator Burr. He's a Republican. I'm chair of the Help Committee. He is my ranking member. And we have been, for the last year, looking at all the federal programs and asking what works, what doesn't work, and where are the best places we can put investments. We're about to introduce that bill and are hoping to get that done in the next couple of months, to direct resources to community centers who know their own community best and can work on whether it's housing, whether it's help for counseling, whether it's all the different healthcare aspects of this, but to really start focusing on directing resources to communities to help deal with this issue. That's obviously a number one priority for us. And finally, I've worked for veterans for a very long time. And one of the things I did when I was chair of the Veteran Committee, we have a lot of veterans who are homeless. I reinvigorated a program that was from a long time ago called the HUD-VASH vouchers. And these are actually vouchers that we give to veterans to be able to go live in a home. And once they are in that home, then they have to use the VA for any kind of health care or mental health care they need in order to keep that voucher. So that helps the wraparound services, gets them a place to stay, somebody who's really working with them and helping them to do that. We need to continue to do that, but I'm interested in that model for what we need right now. Because a lot of these people, if we get the supply, if there's a place to live, you can't just say, live here. We need to make sure they get the help and resources they need to stay there and feel comfortable there and get the job skills they need, so that we can start to really focus on this issue. So I'm looking at all aspects of this.
Perfect. All right, we'll shift gears a little bit here and go back to supply chain problems. So supply chain problems have wreaked havoc on small businesses who have a particularly hard time absorbing the increased cost of their products. Can you speak to if, when there will be remedies to the supply chain problem, and also can resilient, but exhausted small business owners feel confident about the next few years?
That's a hard question to say it's going to be fixed overnight, because we have to remember how we got to where we are. The supply chain shutdown happened because of the pandemic, and it was global. And it's still shut down in China, which is a place, as many of you know, provide a lot of the products that we have. So getting that supply chain moving, we can do things here, but we also have to make sure that other countries are also increasing the supply chain. One thing we can do, as I talked about, was the CHIPS bill. So we are not reliant on a global supply chain. We can't do that for everything. We have to make sure, and we have been focusing on the investments to make sure that we get goods moving again. On our ports and on our supply chain routes, making sure that there are workers available and continuing to move that. But we also have supply chain issues in this country where we have, I think Secretary Buttigieg told me that the truck drivers turnaround is like 90% every year. So, I mean, if you don't have truck drivers, you can't get your stuff. And of course that increases prices. So we really need to look on how we begin to get people back into the truck driving industry and the other supply routes that we have, get the training they need and the incentives to make sure that they feel good about the jobs they do. Oftentimes they own their own truck, can't afford it anymore. Gas prices is not helping this, but that is part of the supply chain issue too. So I can't give you it's going to be over in 2 months, but I can tell you some of the things we've done, the transportation infrastructure bill and the CHIPS bill, and working to lower costs and working globally to get our arms around this pandemic is absolutely critical. And I will just add that one of the bills I'm working on, very excited about, is that Senator Burr, my ranking member on the Committee of Health, and I went back and looked at what happened when we got hit by this pandemic. And it's startling how unprepared our country was for this pandemic that created the nightmare that we have today. We didn't have tests, we didn't have equipment, we didn't have communication. I remember, actually, because you know this all started mostly in our state at the nursing home here in Bothell. I have family that lives very close by there, and within a few weeks, my daughter was calling me and saying, there's no teachers at school. I think they're going to shut it down. And by the way, my kids are sick and I can't find a test. She's calling me to find a test. And I'm calling the CDC and saying, where the hell are the tests? And they told me the most astonishing thing. First, they had some real hiccups. They were not prepared for this. But they said, we're trying to figure out where to send the few that we have. And they were asking doctors and providers and clinics across the country to send them the number of tests that they need based on what they were seeing in terms of sick people. And literally faxing from every single clinic and provider the numbers to some spot in CDC, and people going through paperwork trying to count, oh, there's 40 plus 50 plus, this is crazy. We have a country that should be technologically ready for something like this. So back to the Prevent Pandemics bill, we're looking at how we get CDC up to speed, has the technology they need, the communication systems, that we have those supplies ready for if and when the next pandemic comes. And I just want to never go through this again. We got that bill passed out of our committee. I know you hear all the time we can't do anything. I passed that out of committee with broad bipartisan support. It is going to go to the Senate floor here before the end of the year. We're working with our House counterparts, and I want to make sure that we get that passed and we have the systems in place so that when the next pandemic, and it could be COVID again or something else, we are ready and we don't shut businesses or schools down. That we're ready for that. So that's part of this as well.
Great. So we'll segue a little bit into healthcare. So healthcare costs are increasing at a greater rate than our sales. So is the cost of living in Seattle. Are there any real solutions to this that could happen in the next couple of years? So solutions for rising costs of healthcare.
So, as you know, we passed the ACA, which was put in place to make sure that people, when they buy insurance, actually have a product that actually works for them. Making sure that if you buy a product insurance through an insurance company, it has to cover pre-existing conditions. Making sure that your kids can stay on your health insurance till they're 25. Making sure that if you sell insurance, it has to cover certain conditions, and being much more transparent. And we created a system where people could get lower cost health care and be subsidized in order to be able to purchase that. That has worked really well. By the way, Mitch McConnell has tried 70 times to repeal that law. 70 times. We're not going to let it because it's just too important, and it really does keep health insurance costs down. But why would he want to repeal it? Because we passed it. I don't know. He's saying this.
It seems popular.
Yeah, he's already saying the same thing about the climate change bill and the. Yeah. So we have thanks to really outspoken support for that, kept it in place. But in the last bills, we extended the ACA tax credits because if we hadn't have done that, it would have increased even more. The cost of healthcare is just like all of you are facing: increased costs, fewer workers, all those shortages. So everything I've talked about already will help them. But one of the things we face is one of the things all of you face: a lack of healthcare workers. I mean, they have been through a lot of stress, and we've got to make sure we are doing the kinds of programs we do, loan forgiveness, other things, and encouraging young people to not be discouraged by what they've heard over the last 2 years, but to actually want to go into healthcare fields, because that will help lower the costs as well.
Good point. All right, next, shifting to inflation. There were a lot of questions, as you could imagine, about inflation and rising costs. So again, I'm going to read two questions that are very similar, slight deviation. But what are you doing to tackle rising prices small businesses are facing? And then the sort of companion question, if you will, knowing how the economy could impact the upcoming elections, given the rough inflation report from earlier today, do you feel enough is being done in Congress and by the Fed to stem inflation? So first one's very localized, inflationary costs for small businesses, and then the other being sort of a broader, higher level.
Yeah, I mean, this is a real challenge globally, and I think we have to remember that as we work to try and solve the problems here in our communities and in the nation. I've talked about some of the things we've done. Obviously, the infrastructure bill, getting goods moving again, helping supply chains move again. I mean, when we talk about inflation, we're talking really about the fact that there isn't enough. There isn't enough goods on the shelves. There isn't enough good energy. There isn't enough supplies. There's enough workers, and all of that increases costs. So making sure we're addressing all parts of that is what we are focused on at the national level. Through our infrastructure bill, through the CHIPS bill that I talked about, making sure we're doing workforce training to make sure we've got employees. And one of the biggest barriers that we didn't address that I'm so focused on next year is the issue of childcare. Because too many people tell me today, God, I want to go to work, but there is no place to leave my kids. And you cannot do a good job if you don't know what your kids are doing. So I have a proposal on childcare that we tried to get through last Congress. We were hoping to get it in the Inflation Reduction Act. I was short one vote, but I am working in this election to make sure we get people elected who understand that this is a challenge for our economy, it's a challenge for our families, it's a challenge for business owners, and it is keeping us from being able to grow. So I believe instituting a federal program on childcare that assures that nobody who earns less than $250,000 pays more than 7% of their income towards childcare. It provides grants to communities so that they can build child care facilities. I talk to people who want to be child care workers. They can't find a spot to be. But what if we provided a grant to Lake City? They have an empty space here that we provide you the money for, that you can designate as a child care facility where you get the money to build that, and then we have providers that can come in a child care facility right close to your businesses. That's what I think is a real solution to that. So I tried to get that done this year. I was one vote short. I'm not done. I told the majority leader when we passed the bill in August, I will vote for it if you promise me the next thing we do is remove the barriers for people to go to work, and that's called child care.
Great. I'm going to move on to the next question. I think we're still doing pretty well on time. We've got time for a couple of more. Times are tough. How can we make sure that small business owners have the resources and support to take time off when needed?
And did you notice everybody just laughed? I'm laughing too because I have to tell you, I didn't see a lot of my dad many times. His store was open just 6 days a week, not 7, but we didn't see him 6 days a week, and he opened at 9 and he stayed open till 9. So I understand that just huge stress that people are facing. It's not a solution for everybody, but I will tell you this is why one of the reasons I'm so focused on family paid leave, so that when someone is sick or in a crisis, that they have the ability to be able to take time off, paid leave, to take care of themselves, their family, and just families in crisis should have that. I'll tell you, when I was first elected to the Senate, we had no paid leave or no family leave program at all. I worked my heart out. First bill I passed in the Senate was for unpaid leave. And I thought, we're going to get paid leave soon after this. It's been a while. We still don't have it. But the need is out there. So that's one of the things that I really think we can do to help relieve stress.
Terrific. I think that might be me. Can you hear me just fine? I'll just go without the mic. Here's one that's pretty specific. What can be done to pass the state Safe Banking Act?
Okay, I have been working so hard to get the safe banking done. It is just crazy that we have legal cannabis shops here that are all cash. That is just an invitation to crime. And I know too many stories. It's just terrible. So I've been working really hard at the federal level to pass the Safe Banking Act so that they don't have to be cash-only industries, that our federal government will allow them to do what any other business does, use credit cards, banks, and other things, so that it's a safety issue to me. And I have been working really hard to do this. There are people who want to legalize cannabis across the country, and they want me to wait until they get that bill passed and enough votes. Listen, I'm all for that, but we can't wait on this bill. So I've not given up, and I take stories back every week from people who tell me about the safety and security issues that they face because they're cash only, and we've got to get this done.
Well, I think we are at our last question, and this question will turn a little bit to safety and crime, and certainly in this city and in other parts around the country. But we're seeing a real kind of uptick in gun violence right now. There's a lot of reasons and a lot of different solutions. I know that you've been working very hard on a lot of different legislation in terms of gun safety. And other kinds of measures to try and address some of these issues. Would you just take a minute to close us out on that piece, and then you'll have closing remarks. Just close us out on that question about what you've been working on in terms of gun safety and
crime
violence.
is an issue that we have to address at every single level. Obviously, it is a local issue, it's a state issue, and at the federal level, we have to do our part too. In the American Rescue Plan that we passed, we provided, I can't remember the total amount of money, to communities so that they could keep police and hire new ones. It was a real challenge, as you may remember, during that time. And those funds have helped in every community. But we have to continue that effort at the federal level as we face the issue of crime. But what my opponent will never say to you, this is a gun safety issue as well. Gun violence is on the rise, and we have to do everything we can to protect Americans when it comes to guns. I have been fighting for this, and I'm proud of our state. We've made progress here in our state. federal level, we have not been able to pass anything until Uvalde happened. And finally, we passed small legislation that is going to begin to address this, addressing red flag laws, making sure that people who are under 21 have additional background checks, security checks, and we put in additional funding for community mental health, so that communities really have the resources they need to help identify and help people with mental health issues, which is not the whole crime gun issue. And the other thing I want you to know, I support a national assault ban, first of all, and I have long worked to try and pass federal gun safety legislation that goes way beyond where we are today. I will continue to do that. But the other thing I am doing, I want you to know this, is that one of the reasons that we are told we can't pass anything is we don't have the research to prove it'll work. So I actually funded a program at CDC to begin for the first time to do research about gun violence. Let's do the scientific research, see what we find out, and then we can use that to take steps at the federal level. First time ever, the gun lobby lost because they were opposing me on that. But we are now doing research and will continue to do research at CDC, so we are doing the right thing on gun safety. And of course, mental health that I talked about, also a part of that. But this is something I feel really strongly about.
Thank you. Floor is yours to close us out.
Oh,
I will step
well,
aside.
thank you. Mic without a mic, that's what you would just want to say. First of all, thank you all for coming so much. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm honored to be your voice and fight for all of you back in Washington, D.C. And I appreciate your support and your help. I just think this is such a critical election. I say, every time I'm up for election, I say this is the most important election. This is the most important election. It just is. Women's rights are on the line. Our democracy is on the line. Whether or not we will have people in Washington, D.C. who believe that this democracy is based on our votes and our voices, not using brute force. I was in the nation's capital on January 6th. I saw what happened. We cannot allow brute force to be what decides our elections. And I will fight strongly to make sure we have voter right protections and that we make sure that we stand up for this democracy in the future. And all the issues I just talked to you about, whether we can continue to work to get PPP loans for our restaurants, whether or not we can get child care passed, whether or not we can make sure we continue to lower costs for health care. That's what we are committed on doing, and I would be honored to have your support, your help, your votes, and continue to be your voice for our great state that I love so much. So thank you very much.